East Idaho Newsmakers is brought to you by the Bank of Commerce, your bank of a lifetime.
This is East Idaho Newsmakers with Nate Eaton.
Welcome to East Idaho Newsmakers. We are glad you are with us today. I am excited for today's show. Joining us here in the studio is Terry Miller. Terry is very active with issues concerning Idaho Falls. You may have read some of his op-eds in the Post-Register. He also serves on the Idaho Falls Arts Council, has worked with Parks and Rec, has worked with the library. I came to know Terry because he hired me back in 2005 for my first gig. Terry was the news director at Channel 3. Back when Channel 3 was not set with Channel 8.
Right, back in the real days.
Yes, back when there was, media was a little healthier. So I'm sure you get this question a lot, but what exactly does a news director do? Well,
if he's smart, nothing. He lets everybody else does it, but in a small market like this, a news director wears many hats, and at KIDK, not only did I kind of manage the folks and hiring and that type of thing, but also acted as a kind of an assignment editor. So, you'd come in the morning before all the reporters, figure out where you wanted to go and what you wanted them to do, and then send them out and see them 4 hours later to see if they did it right.
And sometimes we do it right, and sometimes we wouldn't.
Well, yeah, you never know.
So a lot of people think a director's in the control room pushing buttons, things like that. Right. That's not what a news director's doing.
No, that's the whole production side of the thing, and they have more skills, I think, than a lot of the people in the newsroom have. Yeah, because frankly, finding the right button and the right camera is sometimes difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long were you at KIDK?
I knew you were going to ask me that, so I didn't figure it out. But it must have been about, I came in the mid-90s, so about 96 to 2008. Wow. So, and I think at that point, I was the longest serving news director in the state of Idaho. Everybody else got better jobs, but I ended up...
You ended up staying. Now, had you been to Idaho before you moved here?
No. I started in Washington State, moved down to Oregon, and then into California. And then the California company had bought KIDK and a couple of other stations up here in the Northwest, and they said, well, do you want to go to Idaho? And I went, sure, why not? Because I remembered the Northwest with 4 seasons versus Central California with 1, hot. So yeah, that's about how I did it.
So there's so many memories I have of working at KIDK, but most of the reporters that you hire are right out of school, fresh out of college. It's a small market, and we really were expected to come in every day with story pitches. It's not like you're just saying, do this, 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 and this, but it was story pitches, and there were often debates, conversations of, you would challenge us to, why do you think that's a story? Who are you going to interview? It wasn't just go out and do it, which I think helped develop reporters and think about good questions to ask.
Well, yeah, that was the idea. When I was working in California, I was an assignment editor there, and in that size of a market, the assignment editor decides what the story is going to be, who is going to cover it, and makes the contacts with the people that they needed to be interviewed, assigned the photographer with the reporter, and then sent them out, and they did that. And that's really a difficult kind of way to operate. And so I knew that at some point, if you were going to be successful in this business, you had to learn how to actually do it all yourself, which is why at KIDK, we said, okay, we're going to go cover the mayor making some kind of an announcement, but we really don't want just the mayor standing there going, hello, I'm the mayor. You've got to come up with a better idea. And we would have these story meetings that would go on for about an hour in the mornings and kind of decide what the story was going to look like and that type of thing. And then the reporters would go out, and as I said, they'd come back about 2 o'clock, and we have another meeting to see if they actually came up with what we planned. Well, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you can't really change what they've done because you've got a 4 or 5 o'clock deadline. So you kind of went with what they came back, and then kind of corrected it or the way they did it the following day or in a different meeting.
But I don't know if you're giving yourself enough credit, because Terry was very creative in how we would tell our stories. One time there was a noon newscast day, I think it was Bike to Work Day, and you moved the show outside and had Tommy Noel and Sarah Swaby enter the show on bikes. They started the newscast riding a bike to their seats.
Yeah, I actually hadn't remembered that, but you're right. We had a situation when I came to KIDK. KSL in Salt Lake had just gotten all new satellite trucks, and they had 3 old versions of them, and they sold one to Channel 8, one to Channel 6, and one to Channel 3. And so that's how we ended up getting a microwave. They weren't satellite trucks, they were microwave. And when I got there, nobody was using the Channel 3 microwave truck. It was just sitting in the garage because you needed an engineer, you needed somebody to drive. And so I was told, either use the microwave truck or we're going to get rid of it. And so we went live wherever we could. A couple of years, every Friday in May, if I remember correctly, we did the whole show on location, and we did it from underground out by the INL in one of those caves where we actually physically had to crawl hands on our knees through the opening of the cave and haul all the equipment inside.
And that's not an easy task, going live from New York with a crew of 50 people.
Right.
To take a show on the road with a small staff, that's impressive.
Yeah, well, the other problem was that it took the entire staff to do those live shows, which left nobody in the studio if something went wrong. We did one from the zoo one day, one Friday, and we had it all set up, and the microphone, we had folding metal chairs, and we put the microphones on the chairs and everything else, and it started to rain. And it was a 5 o'clock newscast, and it was about 4:40 when it started to rain. And it came down like Hurricane Harvey. Well, of course, the first thing you did is you ran and grabbed the microphone to keep it from getting wet. Well, electricity and water can kind of give you a shocking experience, so to speak. But we pulled everything else out. Everybody kind of went, okay, let's get the monitors out of the way, and we're trying to cover them up. And the sports director at the time ran for a porta potty and shut the door and stayed in there. He didn't help at all. But we lost a couple of monitors, and then at 5, and then we decided, well, we got to do a show. So we were at the zoo, and that's not really that far from where KIDK was. So we sent a couple of anchors back to the station to do the show there. And then about 10 minutes to 5, it stopped raining and the sun came out. Yeah. So then they had to come back to do the whole show again. Yeah. So doing live television is just really fraught with all kinds of dangers.
Yeah. So this is a big question, but what do you think of the state of news today?
Local or national?
Both.
Locally, it's pretty sad. Nationally, it's not much better. Television news goes through a lot of different phases. There was the Walter Cronkite phase, Dad sitting in front of the platform and giving you the news as it happened and that type of thing. Then when there was the air-blown hair phase where you had to be very attractive. You didn't have to know anything about news. All you was a reader. You looked good and you read. And then there was the my God, the world is ending phase, which is what what ABC is still stuck in. If you don't watch us, by gosh, you're going to die tomorrow. And NBC has gone to that, and CBS has never really figured out where they've been since Walter Cronkite left. On the local scene, it looks, from somebody on the other side of the TV set, it looks like the people coming out of school and getting into the business are not as well prepared, perhaps, as they should be. And a lot of people think there's this great big huge pool of people who should be on television, who are applying for every job and that type of, and there isn't. There's a whole big pool of people who think they should be on TV because their girlfriend said they sounded great on the telephone. We used to have a big cardboard box in the newsroom that we referred to as the box of broken dreams, because we would get all of these cassettes of air checks and demo tapes, and we'd take one look at it, and I could do it in 15 seconds, and then toss it into the box, and we never even go back.
I think that box turned into multiple boxes in the basement of the KIDK building.
Yeah.
In fact, an entire room, I believe, was full of old cassettes. I stole a few and dubbed my tape over theirs to send out.
And that was the whole idea.
Yeah.
You know, if you need a tape to send out someplace, here's a whole box, find one that's long enough and go ahead and re-record over it.
So is there ever a day that we go back to the glory days of TV news? Is that long gone?
I don't know. That's a good question. And I always hate people who answer a question like that by saying, that's a good question, Nate. Television has kind of, in my mind, reached a plateau, television news as a whole. You know, you started with, when I first got into television, we were using 35 millimeter slides for video. And then we went to film, but we didn't go to film with sound. It was an old Bell and Howell silent thing. Then television all of a sudden had sound, so you had film and sound. And then came the satellites that they started putting up in space, so you could do a remote from New York and San Francisco at the same time and interconnect them. And then came live trucks, then came satellite trucks, then came the computer age, basically what you have here. And at this point, it seems like the need for television news on a national scale is definitely not what it was 10 years ago. On a local scale, you know, you're going to get stories on channel 3 or 6 or 8 that you're not going to get anywhere else. So you have a local thing, if you can do it right. But so many times I see people who have been hired for one reason or the other, probably because they were the best of the tapes that didn't go into the box, that really shouldn't have been, you know, or they were doing things or reporting on events that they shouldn't be reporting on. In other words, you may find somebody who has a real knack and desire to do cops and courts, but that's only one part of their job, and they're also doing local politics, or they're doing
INL.
INL. Oh
Yeah.
my God! You know, the worst job you could possibly have in the entire country is to be the PR person for the INL, because everybody came in on a 2-year contract, and so just when they would understand what INL really stood for, they were gone. You know, and so the guy had to start all over again with the new guy. But now I don't know. For one thing, with the consolidation of 3 and 8, you've lost the sense of competition, because each station is doing the same news with the same reporters. It's just repackaged, just barely. And the only repackaging is actually where it's going to run in the rundown. And so you kind of lose that, I've got to be better than he is so I can get out and get a better job.
And doesn't that ultimately hurt the public?
Oh yeah, because you're getting news from one perspective only. You may have two stations on, but if the reporter decides that whoever he's interviewing is the bad guy and starts throwing tough questions at him, when in fact he wasn't the bad guy, you're not going to see that side. After the Nixon resignation and the whole Watergate thing, reporters changed. Up until Nixon, reporters had a tendency to believe an elected official or someone in authority. After Nixon, oh my gosh, you couldn't find anybody in the news business who believed anybody else. You know, there's got to be something wrong. I know there's scandal here. It was really tough to try and talk people out of that kind of a state. And then after the 80s and into the late 90s, it kind of changed to where they were still skeptical, but not quite as skeptical. Mm-hmm. If you'd have had that kind of mind thought back in the 30s with Roosevelt, you'd have seen him in a wheelchair. You know?
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, you not only have covered news locally, but you've been all over the world personally for travel and covering stories. I want to talk about that. And then if you can recall, I want to ask you why you decided to hire me.
Oh,
and if
okay.
you ever would have thought that here I'd be interviewing you, running an online website, because I never imagined it.
Well, I'll be glad to tell that story.
All right, we'll be right back.
At the Bank of Commerce, we understand the hard work, determination, and sacrifice it takes to run a successful business. That's why we're here every step of the way to help make your dreams come true. The Bank of Commerce, your bank of a lifetime.
Welcome back to East Idaho Newsmakers. Today we're privileged to have Terry Miller here with us in studio. He is actively involved with a lot of issues in Idaho Falls. He also is the former news director at KIDK Newswatch 3, Eyewitness News. I'm sure you went through a few different names.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Retired now and spending a few moments with us this afternoon. So Terry, you've spent a lot of years in local news, but you also traveled for international and national stories. Was that part of a local news gig back when local news used to travel? Or?
Yes, as a matter of fact. It wasn't so much it wasn't as common in Idaho Falls because of the size of the market and the budgets and that type of thing. But back in the days in the 70s and the mid 80s, it was very common to see a reporter reporting from Singapore for a local station. And it was their local reporter. I remember at one point back in the very early 60s, KOIN TV in Portland took its entire show on the road to Hawaii. Wow. And they had to ship the tape back, and it wasn't tape, it was film, for next day broadcast. But that was common. KCRA in Sacramento was a big station that went places, and they would go wherever it went. In Idaho Falls, one of the kind of criteria that led you to send a team wherever it was there had to be some kind of a local angle. Now, it may have been way out there. We said, I went to Hong Kong for the handover and did some stuff there for Channel 3. And the tie-in was the fact that the Burger King franchise in Hong Kong and China used Simplot potatoes. They were their biggest customer. So
there's your tie.
Yeah, right. I sent a team to Nicaragua one year to do a story on what were they doing? Some kind of refugee relief. It was through BYU Idaho. They had sent some of their people down there to help out with the poor folks in Nicaragua, and so we sent a team down there to do that. And there was the local angle, was BYU.
You didn't send me overseas, but
I sent you to Canada.
You did send me to Canada, yeah. So looking back now, I was a young, eager reporter. You said, why don't you sneak over the border from Canada into the United States?
See if it can be, because at the time we were getting a lot of drug trafficking coming up through the Mexico-California border.
Exactly.
It was coming right up I-15.
And this was, I mean, immigration, I think, was starting to become a hot button issue. So I went with a friend of mine, and we went up and we did it, and we found out that sex slaves were being sent over the border, and a huge eye-opening experience for me. And then you sent me up to Kellogg to mine in the silver mines. Back when iPhones were just coming out and iPods, the price of silver shot through the roof. Yeah. So these mines were staying busy. So I got to go, 2 miles underground and see them get this silver out. I mean, those are stories I've never forgotten, that I'll never will forget. So why'd you let me do them? I mean,
well, there was a saying that was going around at the time that Channel 6 did the press releases, Channel 8 did whatever was happening locally, and Channel 3 did the fun stories. And that's why we did it, because it was different. Nobody else was doing that type of thing. And it was a gimmick, sure it was a gimmick, but it was also A, a local angle, and B, interesting, and C, tied into something that people were becoming aware of. And it was just fun.
You've been in Idaho Falls since the mid-90s. What's changed the most?
As far as
the city, the area.
Well, growth, obviously. One of the reasons that I came to Idaho Falls was the population at that point was somewhere like 40,000 or something. I'm kind of thinking about that. And I grew up in a town of 25,000. So it was like coming home in a way. While I came after the strip malls took up 17th, because any old timer in Idaho Falls was saying, well, I know when 17th and Holmes was a country road. Well, it was paved by the time I got here. But it's changed. I think the interesting thing about it is county or city government hasn't really changed. When I came, city government was very forward-thinking and willing to take a chance, let's build a power dam type thing. And it was really very progressive for what you would think Idaho would be very conservative. And it hasn't changed that much. It's still a progressive government, which kind of surprises me, because Idaho has become even more conservative than it was in the past. There is a story going around. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but the story says that Idaho and Idaho Falls are so conservative, you can't make left turns.
We will get a reporter on that. You're on the Arts Council.
Yes.
And one thing that impressed me when I moved back with my family 2 years ago is you bring in some pretty good acts.
Yes, we have, and that's basically, the Arts Council is basically the result of a brainchild by 6 or 7 people, including Miles Willard and his wife, who ended up contributing the majority of money to fix up the old Paramount Theater and that type of thing. But it's continued to grow, and we're now in a situation where we used to do a Broadway show at least once or twice a year in the Colonial Theater, and Broadway shows are very, very popular, but they're also very expensive. And so the Colonial finally got a little bit too small in order to get enough people in at a price they could afford to see a show. So now we've kind of contracted that out to Broadway at the Civic, which is a company from back east that books the shows there, and we kind of help them out with publicity and front of house stuff if they need it. But it's given the Broadway shows a bigger stage and a little bit a better opportunity. And if they ever get the Civic Theater renovation completed, it'll be wonderful.
Do you think Idaho Falls needs an event center?
No, not really. No, there's going to be a big fight. as to which direction the event center goes. If you will remember your Idaho Falls history, and I don't know whether you were here at that time, when they originally started, there was a huge opposition from Apple Athletic Club because they felt the plans at that time were infringing a government public entity against private business. And they were able to knock down that, and then it kind of went to, well, it's going to be kind of a hockey rink, it's going to be kind of do this and kind of do that. And they've gotten the money, but the price has now gone so high that the original outcome that they had anticipated for costs has outgrown it. And now there's a move to which is kind of an undercurrent move to move the focus a little bit back towards a recreation center. And so that kind of puts it back to where it was originally, and it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Well, I have a feeling that we'll be reporting on that for a while. So, I was a senior in college. I had interned down at KUTV in Salt Lake. I had a tape. If you try to get an on-air job, you put a tape together of some segments of you, talking on camera, doing a story. Sent it to 50 stations, spent a lot of money because it was VHS. I got 2 responses, both said no. So then I went to Channel 8, KIFI, and showed the news director, and he said, I'll hire you as a weekend editor. Then I went to Channel 6 in Pocatello, and Brenda Baumgartner, bless her heart, said no. And then I brought my tape to you. Do you remember that?
Yeah, but not quite in that order. What I remember, and I don't even know whether we were advertising. Were we advertising?
I think I just called you cold.
Yeah, I think it was just a cold call. And he walks into the station and says, "Hi, I'm Nate Eaton, and I'm from BYU, Idaho, and I want to be a TV star." Well, not quite. But so I sat there and I talked to you for a while. And I didn't really have an opening, and you'd handed me your tape, and I didn't look at your tape. And then you left, and I did the usual, well, we'll take it under advisement, blah, blah, blah. And at that point, then you went over to Channel 8, because after you left, I went, well, I've got this tape, I might as well look at it. I looked at it, and I went, oh my Lord, I just let a good one get away. I ran into the manager's office and says, I don't know, we got a budget, we got to hire this guy. And then I called you, and you were at Channel 8 interviewing, and I'm like, don't do anything, come back and see me, And you came back, and luckily Channel 8 didn't have a position for
You're right, that is how it went, because I remember I told you I'm at Channel 8, and you said, well, I want to get moving on this quick.
Yeah, come on back,
Yeah,
and it was probably a half hour or so before you got back.
It turned out to be the best thing that could have ever happened for me.
Well, and Channel 3 also, because not only did we get an eager person who knew what he was trying to do, but we got somebody who lived in Rexburg. And we were trying to get that Rexburg audience back. And so we hit all of the balls in the right way.
And for me, like I said, you gave me the freedom to do what I wanted to do. And I think I was a year into my contract when Brad Hudson decided to leave news. And Terry came to me and said, would you mind filling in for him until we get a replacement, and are you interested in the job? And I wasn't. I wanted to move on to a bigger market, but you let me anchor for 6 months, which gave me great practice, and then I ended up signing for another year because I was so happy there. So anyway, never thought I'd be back here, but it's been great chatting with you, and this has obviously been a little bit more personal than we normally are, but it's like interviewing your old, college professor. You can keep up with Terry with the occasional column in the Post-Register. Thanks so much for coming in here. Terry Miller, a news legend in these parts, and very active in his community. He's done a lot for the people around here, and of course for me personally. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
East Idaho Newsmakers is brought to you by the Bank of Commerce, your bank of a lifetime.